744. Local. Taiwan Strait, 38 nautical miles northwest of Kaohsiung, 29 nautical miles from the Chinese coast near Quanzhou. International waters, the center line of the strait, where neither Taiwan nor China held undisputed jurisdiction, and where both had contested every naval movement for 70 years. Sea state, moderate. Swells at 1.6 meters from the northeast, overcast at 1,400 feet, visibility 8 nautical miles. A gray, straight morning. USS Chung-Hoon, DDG-93, Arleigh Burke-class Flight 2A destroyer, was conducting a combined Taiwan Strait transit with the Republic of China Navy, frigate PFG-1112, a Knox-class derivative, 3,200 tons, armed with Xiong-Feng anti-ship missiles and a single-arm missile launcher forward. The transit had been coordinated through back-channel defense protocols and was described publicly as a routine U.S. Navy freedom of navigation passage. It was not routine. It was the first time a U.S. destroyer and a ROC Navy frigate had conducted a coordinated bilateral passage through the strait simultaneously. The two ships were in a loose formation. PFG-1112 500 meters to Chung-Hoon's northeast, both northbound at 14 knots, running lights on, AIS transmitting. Their transit corridor put them on the strait's center line, equidistant from both coasts. The ROC frigate was inside visual range. Its bridge crew and Chung-Hoon's bridge crew could see each other in the gray morning light. The planned contact picture had been dense since the formation entered the strait at 5:30. 4 Type-052D destroyers were operating in two pairs. One pair 22 nautical miles to the northwest on a parallel northbound track. One pair 18 nautical miles to the southeast running a counter-transit. A Type 055 cruiser was holding 41 nautical miles north, positioned across the formation's exit point from the strait. 3 planned Coast Guard vessels were making slow approach geometries toward the formation from the east. Too slow to constitute an intercept, fast enough to constitute intent. 6 planned warships in layered geometry around 2 transiting vessels. The Taiwan Strait had been many things over 70 years. Today, it was a box. The SLQ-32 had been logging elevated plan radar emissions since the transit began. The Type 346B fire control radar on the northwestern Type 052D pair had illuminated the formation twice since 6 o'clock. Brief, 3 to 5 second illuminations, consistent with the targeting harassment pattern documented in previous Taiwan Strait transits. The TAO had logged both. Both were within the established harassment baseline. Neither had triggered a threshold response. At 7:46 and 14 seconds, both illuminations stopped being baseline. The SLQ-32 registered a sustained Type 346B fire control lock. Not the brief illuminations of the previous 90 minutes, but a continuous acquisition lock on a specific contact. The bearing was northwest. The lock was on PFG-1112, not on Chung-Hoon, on the ROC frigate. At 7:46:22, 8 seconds after the lock was first registered, the SPY-1D acquired 3 launches from the northwestern Type 052D pair. All 3 tracks bearing 304, range 22 nautical miles, velocity increasing through Mach 1.5. Classification: YJ, 12 anti-ship cruise missile, rocket boosted to cruise speed, sea skimming terminal phase, active radar seeker. Time of flight: 3 minutes, 11 seconds. The TAO called General Quarters at 7:46:24, 2 seconds after missile track classification. 3 YJ-12S. All 3 tracking PFG-1112. None of the 3 tracks had their terminal guidance locked on Chung-Hoon. The fire control lock that had activated at 7:46:14 was on the ROC frigate's radar return, and the YJ-12 seekers were homing on that return. This was not a strike on a U.S. warship. This was a planned strike on a Republic of China Navy vessel that was transiting the strait in formation with a U.S. Navy vessel. The distinction was legal. It was not physical. PFG-1112 was 500 meters northeast of Chung-Hoon. A YJ-12 warhead detonating against a 3,200-ton frigate at 500 meters generated a blast radius and fragmentation pattern that extended well beyond 500 meters. The laws of physics did not recognize the distinction the plan's lawyers had constructed. The Chung-Hoon Tao had 3 minutes and 9 seconds before the YJ-12S reached PFG 1112. He engaged all three. This was the decision that would be analyzed in every subsequent legal, strategic, and operational review of the engagement. USS Chung-Hoon was not the designated target of the three YJ-12S. The missiles were not on terminal guidance toward a U.S. Navy vessel. Under the strict legal framework of self-defense, Chung-Hoon had not yet been attacked. The argument for non-intervention was available. It was coherent. It lasted approximately 0 seconds in the TAO's calculus, because PFG 1112 was 500 meters away, and whatever happened to PFG 1112 was going to happen to Chung-Hoon. In the same physical space. SM-6 rounds 1 and 2 away at 7:46:31 against track Alpha. 7 seconds from missile classification to first interceptor away. SM-6 rounds 3 and 4 away at 07:46:36 against track Bravo. SM-6 rounds 5 and 6 away at 07:46:41 against track Charlie. 6 SM, 6 rounds, 3 targets, 2 rounds each. PFG 1112 had also reacted. The frigate's single-arm launcher was rotating to its engagement position, but the ROC frigate's air defense system, a modified SM-1MR installation with significantly shorter range and slower engagement geometry than Chung-Hoon's Aegis, needed time that the 3-minute and 9-second window was compressing rapidly. PFG 1112 achieved 1 SM-1MR launch at 7:46:48 against track Alpha as a supplementary engagement. The SM-1MR's intercept probability against a Mach 2.0 sea-skimming YJ-12 at this engagement geometry was assessed as low. It was the only option available. At 7:48:19, 1 minute and 48 seconds after the SM-6 launch, Round 1 reached track Alpha at 14 nautical miles, mid-course intercept. Alpha, neutralized. Round 3 reached track Bravo at 7:48:27 at 12 nautical miles. Bravo, neutralized. Track Charlie was the problem. SM-6 Round 5 had computed a clean intercept geometry against track Charlie at 11 nautical miles. The round reached its computed intercept point at 7:48:33, and the seeker acquired the YJ-12 at 9.2 nautical miles intercept range. Detonation. The SM-6 warhead activated against the YJ-12's forward fuselage, the seeker and guidance section. The guidance unit was rendered inoperable. The YJ-12's active radar seeker ceased transmitting at 7:48:34. This was not a clean intercept. The YJ-12's 300-kilogram warhead body, intact, armed, no longer guided, continued on the missile's last computed heading at Mach 1.8. The guidance defeat had occurred at 9.2 nautical miles from the target. The unguided warhead body would cover that distance in approximately 16 seconds on a trajectory that had been computed toward PFG 1112's last radar-painted position. PFG 1112 had been maneuvering since general quarters, turning hard to starboard, increasing speed, presenting a smaller aspect to the inbound threats. In the 16 seconds between the guidance defeat of Charlie and the unguided warhead body's arrival at the target zone, the ROC frigate had moved approximately 200 meters from its last locked position. The unguided warhead body's trajectory, computed to a point that was now 200 meters from the ship, brought it to a detonation at 9 meters below the surface and 47 meters off PFG 1112's port bow. An underwater detonation of a 300-kilogram warhead at 47 meters lateral distance and 9 meters depth generates a pressure wave and fragment cone that is not survivable for a 3,200-ton frigate at that range. It is a near miss in the lexicon of naval warfare. In the lexicon of ship survivability, it is a significant hydrodynamic shock event and a fragment impact that can be catastrophic to exposed systems and personnel. For PFG-1112, the event at 7:48:50. The unguided warhead's proximity detonation produced a hull shock that cracked the frigate's sonar dome and displaced its starboard shaft bearing, reducing propulsion to a single shaft. Flooding in the forward auxiliary space from a hairline weld fracture propagated by the shock. The forward SM-1MR launcher was rendered inoperable by fragmentation that peppered the launcher's guidance radar. Speed reduced to 8 knots. For USS Chung-Hoon, at 500 meters from the detonation point, the physical effects were less severe but not negligible. The pressure wave from a 300-kilogram warhead detonation at 500 meters lateral distance and 9 meters depth reached Chung-Hoon's hull as a transmitted shock through the water column. Attenuated by distance, but still sufficient to exceed the threshold for equipment mounting shock tolerance in specific systems. The SPY-1D Array 3, the aft starboard array, lost its power feed at 7:48:52. 2 seconds after the detonation, a shock-induced electrical fault in the array's power distribution panel. The array went offline. 25% of Chung-Hoon's radar coverage, the aft starboard quadrant, went dark. Additionally, the forward CIWS experienced a mechanical shock fault that locked its traverse mechanism in its current bearing position. The gun was still functional, but could only engage targets within 15 degrees of its locked bearing. The system registered the fault at 7:48:53, and automated fault isolation procedures began. Estimated time to restore traverse function, 14 minutes. The SPS-73 navigation radar antenna, mounted on the port bridge wing structure, was struck by 2 fragments from the warhead's blast cone that had traveled 500 meters through air and still retained sufficient velocity to impact the antenna housing. The antenna was inoperable. Chung-Hoon's hull was intact. No flooding, no fire, no penetration. But SPY-1D Array 3 was offline. The forward CIWS traverse was locked, and the navigation radar antenna was gone. The ship was degraded. The 3 YJ-12S had been engaged. 2 were cleanly neutralized. The third's warhead detonated 47 meters from a ROC frigate, which was now damaged and slowing. And a US Navy destroyer 500 meters away had lost a radar array and a CIWS traverse from the pressure wave and fragmentation of a weapon that had been fired at a different ship. The PLAN had fired at the ROC frigate, not at the US ship. The PLAN's lawyers had a position. The physics did not support it. The DCA assessed Chung-Hoon's damage at 7:51:14, 2 minutes and 24 seconds after the detonation. Array 3 offline. CIWS traverse locked. Navigation radar inoperable. No flooding, no fire, all propulsion nominal. VLS fully operational. 22 SM-6 remaining. SPY-1D at 75% coverage. PFG-1112 was managing its flooding and shaft damage. The ROC frigate transmitted its status to Chung-Hoon at 7:52:00. Single shaft propulsion, flooding controlled, forward launcher inoperable. Ship degraded, but not in immediate danger of loss. Speed 8 knots. Requesting Chung-Hoon escort to Southern Strait exit. The captain of USS Chung-Hoon was managing 2 simultaneous obligations: his ship's combat readiness and the safety of the ROC frigate 500 meters away. He reported to 7th Fleet at 7:52:30. The report required a decision at the highest level. USS Chung-Hoon had engaged, and largely defeated, a planned strike that was legally targeted at a non-US vessel. The damage to Chung-Hoon had resulted from the proximity detonation of a warhead that had been fired at the ROC frigate. The causal chain was direct. Plan YJ, 12 launch, guidance defeat by Chung-Hoon's SM-6. Warhead proximity detonation. Blast wave and fragmentation. US warship damage. The plan's position that they had not struck a US vessel was legally technical, operationally irrelevant, and strategically untenable. 7th Fleet transmitted the engagement report to Indopacom at 7:53. Indopacom to the National Command Authority at 7:54. Authorization came at 8:02:44. 10 minutes and 14 seconds after the captain's report. The authorization was specific: respond to the Plan YJ-12 strike. The legal framework acknowledged Chung-Hoon's engagement of weapons targeting a partner nation's vessel, an act consistent with collective self-defense principles, and the physical damage to a U.S. warship from the resulting detonation. The response was authorized. Target package: Site Alpha, the Northwestern Type-052D pair, the vessels that had fired the YJ-12S, both still at 22 nautical miles northwest on parallel northbound track, both within weapons range. Their YJ-12 VLS cells had fired 3 of their assessed 8-round load, 5 rounds remaining per vessel. Site Bravo, the PLAN Coast Guard command vessel leading the 3-vessel approach group to the east. PLAN Coast Guard vessels had been providing the formation's flanking coverage during the transit. Their positioning was assessed as integral to the operational architecture that had enabled the YJ-12 strike. Site Charlie, the PLAN Eastern Strait coastal radar installation at Quanzhou, assessed as the over-the-horizon targeting node that had provided continuous position data on the transit formation since 5:30. Without it, any follow-on strike would lose targeting quality significantly. Site Delta, the PLAN Maritime Operations Coordination Facility on Dongshan Island, 90 nautical miles south-southwest, assessed as the operational authorization node for the Strait engagement. USS Shiloh, CG-67, was operating 110 nautical miles south. Tomahawk launch tasking received at 8:03. USS Barry, DDG-52, was 95 nautical miles southeast. Tasking received simultaneously. Carrier Strike Group, USS Ronald Reagan, CVN-76, was 260 nautical miles east. Air wing authorization at 8:04. T+0, YJ-12 launches detected. 7:46. T+4 minutes. 3 intercepts complete. Detonation, Chung-Hoon damaged. 7:50. T+16 minutes. Authorization. 8:02. T+18 minutes. First Tomahawk, USS Shiloh. 8:04. T+22 minutes. First F/A, 18E/F. Wheels up from Reagan. 8:08. T+35 minutes. Tomahawks reach Type-052D pair. 8:21. T+74 minutes. F/A, 18 first wave weapons release. 9 o'clock. Total from detonation to first adversary contact neutralized. 31 minutes. First Tomahawk, USS Shiloh, 0804. Cost, $1.87 million. Target, Site Alpha, the lead. Type-052D of the Northwestern pair. The vessel was still at 22 nautical miles northwest, tracked continuously by Chung-Hoon's SPY-1D on 3 remaining arrays. Running cost, $1.87 million. Tomahawks 2 through 6 in sequence. Second Type-052D in the pair. Follow-on rounds on both vessels to ensure neutralization, and the PLAN Coast Guard command vessel at Site Bravo. Running cost, $11.2 million. Tomahawks 7 through 11 from Shiloh and Barry. Site Charlie, Quanzhou coastal radar. 5 rounds against the primary antenna array, the radar processing facility, and the communications relay. Running cost, $20.5 million. Tomahawks 12 through 15. Site Delta, Dongshan Island Coordination Facility. 4 rounds. Running cost, $27.9 million. At 8:21, 31 minutes after the detonation, the first Tomahawk reached the lead Type-052D at 22 nautical miles northwest. The vessel was still on its parallel northbound track. The round's terminal seeker acquired the ship and guided to impact amidships. The Type-052D sustained severe structural damage. It was no longer capable of directed offensive operations. Running cost at this point, $11.2 million. 2 Type-052D destroyers, assessed at $900 million each, rendered inoperable for $11.2 million in Tomahawks. The vessels that had fired 3 YJ-12 missiles at a ROC Navy frigate in formation with a U.S. destroyer were non-operational within 31 minutes. 8:24. Site Bravo, PLAN Coast Guard Command vessel. The Tomahawk assigned to this contact had been computing against its last logged position. The vessel had changed course at 8:11, turning south at 12 knots when the Tomahawk's launch signatures were detected by its own ICE-W systems. The Tomahawk's terminal seeker acquired a radar contact 1.1 nautical miles from the designated point. The contact was assessed as the Coast Guard vessel, thermal and radar cross-section consistent, and the weapon guided to impact. Vessel assessed as rendered inoperable. First fog element. Post-engagement confirmation awaited MQ-9 Reaper imagery, not yet available at time of reporting. 8:33. Site Charlie, Guangzhou, coastal radar. 4 of 5 Tomahawks confirmed on target. The primary antenna array and radar processing facility confirmed inoperable on MQ-9, feed at 083411. The 5th round, designated against the communications relay structure, impacted a building 80 meters from the relay based on a 6-hour-old coordinate fix. The relay structure survived. Second fog element, 8:39. Site Delta, Dongshan Island. 4 rounds. All 4 confirmed on target. The coordination facility's primary structure and communications annex confirmed neutralized at 8:41. The FA-18 formations from Reagan arrived at weapons release range at 9 o'clock. Targets: the Southeastern Type-052D pair, the 2 destroyers that had been running a counter-transit 18 nautical miles to the southeast, and whose positioning had been assessed as part of the operational architecture for the strike. They had not fired. They had been the blocking element. The southern pair, whose presence had compressed the transit formation's maneuvering room and contributed to the fixed geometry that made the YJ-12 targeting solution predictable. Under the authorized response package, the southeastern pair was within the engagement authorization as assets that had participated in the operational architecture. 8 JSOW munitions against both vessels. 4 rounds per destroyer, targeting the radar and VLS infrastructure. 6 of 8 rounds confirmed impact. Both destroyers assessed as severely degraded. 1 JSOW impacted a non-critical aft structure on Destroyer 2, rather than the designated VLS forward section due to a terminal guidance update delay. The VLS forward section was undamaged. Third fog element, second F/A, 18 wave at 0914. 6 JDAMs against PLAN radar installations at Penghu Island approach positions, the sensor network that had been tracking the transit formation for the entire passage. All 6 confirmed impact. At 9:31, both formations recovered to Reagan. All aircraft nominal. The accounting. PLAN investment in the Strait engagement. 3 YJ-12 missiles at approximately $2.5 million each. $7.5 million. Operational coordination. Positioning of 6 PLAN surface combatants. Coast Guard vessels. Estimated $3 million. Total. $10.5 million. Damage achieved. PFG 1112. Single shaft, flooding controlled, forward launcher inoperable. Estimated repair $22 million, 60-day timeline. USS Chung-Hoon. SPY 1D. Array 3 offline. CIWS traverse locked. Navigation antenna inoperable. Estimated repair $4.8 million, 18 days. Neither vessel was lost. Neither was rendered combat ineffective. Both returned to port under their own power. The plan had not intended to damage USS Chung-Hoon. Their legal and strategic calculation that striking the ROC frigate rather than the US destroyer created a more defensible position and a lower risk of direct US retaliation had been operationally logical. It was physically incorrect. The proximity detonation from Chung-Hoon's guided defeat of the 3rd YRJ-12 produced blast and fragmentation effects that did not recognize the legal distinction between the intended target and the ship 500 meters away. U.S. response cost: 15 Tomahawks at $1.87 million, $28.1 million, 14 F/A, 18 E/F sorties, $12.6 million, 1 MQ-9 Reaper sortie, $0.4 million. Total, $41.1 million. Adversary assets rendered inoperable. 2. Type-052D destroyers from the northwestern pair. Both severely damaged, assessed as requiring 18 to 24 months repair at planned shipyard capacity. 2. Type-052D destroyers from the southeastern pair. Both severely degraded, VLS of 1 undamaged in 1 section. Quanzhou Coastal Radar. Primary installation confirmed neutralized. Dongshan Island Coordination Facility. Confirmed neutralized. 1 Coast Guard command vessel. Assessed rendered inoperable. Confirmation pending. Total assessed value removed. Approximately $3.6 billion in warship capacity and fixed infrastructure. The plan's strategic miscalculation was architectural. The decision to target PFG 1112 rather than USS Chung-Hoon was based on a model that separated the physical reality of 2 ships 500 meters apart from the legal reality of their different national flags. The model was legally coherent. The YJ-12's blast physics at 47 meters proximity detonation did not operate on legal frameworks. They operated on distance and energy dispersion. USS Chung-Hoon was 500 meters from a 300-kilogram warhead detonation. The laws of physics determined the outcome. The laws of nations determined the response. The second miscalculation. The response authorization assumed a minimum 4 to 6 hour legal and diplomatic review process before any kinetic U.S. action. The standard timeline the plan had modeled based on previous Taiwan Strait incidents. Authorization came in 10 minutes and 14 seconds. The first Tomahawks were in the air 18 minutes after the YJ-12 launches. The Type-052D pair that fired was non-operational 31 minutes after their engagement. The plan had deployed 6 surface combatants plus Coast Guard assets to manage a bilateral transit. They had executed a YJ-12 strike that avoided direct engagement of a U.S. vessel. They had received a response that neutralized 4 of their 6 warships plus fixed infrastructure and left the transit formation. Both ships damaged but operational, completing its passage through the strait. USS Chung-Hoon, DDG-93. SPY-1, D-Array 3 offline, 25% radar degradation. Forward CIWS, traverse locked, partial coverage only. Navigation radar inoperable. No flooding. No fire. Propulsion fully nominal. VLS, 22 of 28 SM6 remaining. Hull intact throughout. Repair estimate, $4.8 million, 18 days. PFG 1112, ROC Navy. Single shaft propulsion. Forward launcher inoperable. Flooding controlled. Repair estimate, $22 million, 60 days. Both ships completed straight transit and arrived Keelung at 14:33 local. USS Shiloh, CG-67. No damage. 11 Tomahawks expended. USS Barry, DDG-52. No damage. 4 Tomahawks expended. USS Ronald Reagan, CVN-76. 14F/A-18E/F sorties. All aircraft recovered. Total U.S. response cost, $41.1 million. Adversary. Northwestern Type-052D pair. Both severely damaged, non-operational. Southeastern Type-052D pair. Both severely degraded. 1 VLS section undamaged. Coast Guard command vessel. Rendered inoperable. Confirmation pending. Quanzhou radar. Confirmed neutralized. Dongshan facility. Confirmed neutralized. U.S. execution gaps. Coast Guard vessel course change. Post-engagement confirmation pending. Quanzhou communications relay survived. 6-hour-old coordinate fix. Southeastern pair VLS section survived JSOW guidance delay. The straight transit completed as planned. PFG 1112 and USS Chung-Hoon arrived at Keelung at 14:33. 18 days for Chung-Hoon's sensors to be repaired. 60 days for the ROC frigate's shaft and launcher. Both ships returned to service. The 4 PLAN Type-052D destroyers that had made up the escort and blocking formation. Assessed at 18 to 24 months before they returned to service. if their yards can handle the concurrent workload. The plan had constructed a legal argument around the distinction between targeting a U.S. ship and targeting a ship transiting with a U.S. ship. The argument required the blast wave from a proximity detonation to stop at the legal boundary between national flags at 500 meters distance. Blast waves do not read legal briefs. The strait is open.